right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 160 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I am one of your co-hosts, Billy Bob. I'm on the West Coast. I've got my other co-host, Ian Kummer, streaming live from a suburb in Moscow. I've got my other co-host, Carlo Parcelli, streaming live from Washington, D.C. And our special guest today is Greg Rosen, streaming live from Chicago, Illinois. We have entitled our program today, Another Liberal Genocide. And, to a lot of people's minds, those are probably contradictory terms. Like liberals don't believe in genocide, right? Like liberals oppose genocide. Liberals, respect human rights and want to, support human rights. But again, my constant refrain is that liberalism is the ideology that facilitates oligarchy, and it's not really something that the oligarchs believe in. It's more something that they find convenient to maintain their oligarchy. And so, when the question comes, well, do we follow our liberal values and support human rights, or do we engage in genocide to further our material interests as a class, as a group of wealthy and powerful billionaires interested in maintaining an empire? Well, obviously, the human rights are always subordinate to the interests of imperialism and to the the material interests of the oligarchy. So there's been a number of genocides since World War II, depending on how you wanna define the term genocide. But there was the dirty wars in Central and South America, where we sent in narco terrorist death squads to murder priests and nuns and civilians and anybody that was collaborating with a government that might want to, do basic things like land reform. In Indonesia, there was a genocide of like 2 million leftists because, they wanted to not align themselves with the United States. Vietnam, we destroyed entire jungles and just left, unexploded ordnance all over that country. Is that genocide? I would say that probably, comes at least very close to meeting that definition. Now in Korea, I think we killed, I don't know, I want to say a lot of the population. Was it a third? Did we kill a third of the population?
It was about 20% went out of 5. Yes.
20%, but we definitely reduced every building that was over 2 stories to rubble. So, we destroyed every possible, structure that was, for societal use. So, the United States, liberalism, the West, has engaged repeatedly in genocide, but the current genocide is perhaps among the worst and most abhorrent. And I make that argument because of, 2 things. Just, for one thing, it's the hypocrisy. It's the idea that, the West does care about human rights, that the West is sincerely interested in, protecting things like freedom, justice, democracy, and human rights. And so, and again, that is the proclamation from all of the world leaders in Europe, in the United States, and we're using that pretense again to condemn Russia, right? So it's like with the Russian situation, we're saying no, we care about the rule of law, we care about the Ukrainians, and we can't allow evil Russia to do these unjust and immoral things to the people of Ukraine. Why? Because our values. It's our values. But then you have things like what's going on in Gaza, and it's just so obvious they don't have fucking values. There are no values. Liberalism is valueless. Liberalism is all about, maintaining their oligarchy and furthering the interests of empire. So that's my rant. That's my morning rant, guys. So sorry I had to, make you guys listen to me. But I'm sure you guys have your own thoughts on the Gaza genocide or anything related, because there's a lot going on. Does anybody want to comment?
Well, I would just toss in East Timor after the Indonesian debacle, where lists of so-called communists were eliminated. Then 250,000 people died in East Timor, essentially a proxy invasion led by the U.S. In that region. And I mean, I had a number of thoughts, but as I was listening to you, they went out of my mind. I'm sure they'll come back to me.
Okay, yeah, no, East Timor, I kind of include that with Indonesia, and there's a great book called The Jakarta Method, which kind of really just documents that genocide very well. So because a lot of people don't see things, well, number one, they don't even know about the genocide in Indonesia, but they don't view the Vietnam War or the Korean War or the dirty wars and they don't view those, they don't think of those as genocidal things. But
when the numbers get up in the millions, you're talking real murder, and you can probably apply that genocide to it. I feel. I mean, it's of course it's subjective, but Gaza is utterly blatant in its. There's the powerful irony of a Jewish state under the aegis of the Zionists, repeating what their victimizers did to them in the 1940s, is, I think, puts the whole thing in a more powerful and obvious framework of how bad what you're talking about is, especially given the fact that the U.S. Government, corporate power, and the media have been so blind to it, and have made such outrageously ridiculous, incomprehensible, brought such incomprehensible lack of judgment to what's really going on.
And I'm, you spoke of hypocrisy. I'm reminded of the hoax, the fully contrived hoax about a Uyghur genocide in Xinjiang province, and how that resulted in sanctions, right? So the United States, does not buy cotton from Xinjiang, and they don't, any country or any corporation that tries to buy cotton from Xinjiang gets in trouble. And so, it's outlawed. You can't utilize cotton from Xinjiang, and you'll get in trouble with the U.S. government if you do. So, and that was because China, supposedly was engaged in a genocide there. And I saw, you saw Pentagon officials talking about 3 million people in concentration camps, and they were just trying to make so much propaganda hay out of it, and there was no there at all. But in Gaza, I mean, you have a literal genocide where it's just abominable. They're trying to make those conditions so intolerable that they're forced to leave, so that Israel can take that over, and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, are being murdered in the process, and they're being starved, and water is being withheld. They're being concentrated into areas at gunpoint and through bombing, and it's just an abominable genocide. And the Western media just pretends like there's nothing to see. Every day you can turn on CNN or Fox News, and they couldn't care less. They couldn't care less. And so that ought to tell everyone everything they need to know about reality. Like that ought to be enough to clue people in to what's going on. But people are really stupid.
I just want to say that, it is, yes, I mean, like Carlos said, it is ironic that, this mirrors, the Holocaust narrative, but I would say it's not, coincident, it's by design, because if you want to perpetrate a genocide against someone, the first step is to paint yourselves as a victim of genocide. And to paint your victims as the perpetrators of genocide. So, they really hype up, the Arabs are just like the Nazis. They want to hate all Jews. They want to genocide all Jews. And we have to kill them before they kill us. That's basically the narrative in a nutshell. And also, I think, we have to think, why is it even called the Holocaust to begin with? I mean, it's like the Holodomor. It's like anytime you have this event in history where they have to come up with a special word for it, it's like, why does this need its own special word? Like, it's like it's a Star Wars episode. Episode 18, Star Wars. The Holocaust, the Empire. Literally. It's branding. It's branding and marketing. Why can't they just say the victims of World War II? Even the Soviet war crime trials after the war did not specify the ethnicity or religion or anything of the victims. They said it was for the Nazis, the fascist crimes against Soviet citizens. So, but on our side, we excluded all other victims, right, and hyped up this one particular group. To the exclusion of others. And I think that's important for the Cold War, the politics of the Cold War. I mean, that basically you had a country that lost a quarter of its citizens in this war, and most of its most valuable territory was destroyed, right? The farmland and the biggest cities were all in the western part of the Soviet Union. Those were destroyed or badly damaged, and there was a famine. But then we're basically arguing we have to embargo them and impoverish them as much as possible, even before they've even had a chance to recover from this war. Well, how do you justify that? Well, you just exclude them from the narrative of the war and just paint Hitler like, he hated Jews specifically, and, it's all about them. And of course, that lays the groundworks for the politics of Israel, which was a combination of terrorism against British citizens, against Christians, against Muslims, against everybody, right? Even the British headlines at the time called it terrorism. Jewish terrorism in Palestine is what they called it. It's not me making it up. That's what they called it. And so they won the media war, and they connected the two. And you kind of said, has everyone else here seen the Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz interview? I know we talked about it in the show. You really see Ted Cruz's brain imploding, like on screen. You can see it just imploding, because we have to support Israel because the Bible says we have to support the Jewish state. But in the same breath, you can't criticize Israel and use interchangeably with, is because that's anti-Semitism, or even just criticizing Israel at all in any context is anti-Semitism. Burning the Israeli flag because you're protesting not Jews, you're protesting the politics and the war of the Israeli state. That's anti-Semitism too, and it's illegal now. We violated our own constitution to protect Israel. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, I heard if you're a state that doesn't support Israel or something, you won't be able to receive.
I know what you're saying. So the exact terms are: if you are an NGO or a company that provides relief, you cannot get funding if you participate in any boycott against Israel, which doesn't directly harm those states, but it does. Obviously, if you have contractors who are in the best geographically or materially just in the best position to bring supplies to those affected areas, and it's like, this guy boycotts this foreign country. Well, you can't
You can't help out American citizens in a flood
right.
disaster
Yeah,
or a
exactly.
hurricane.
Or a hurricane, right.
It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. And so, that's in the country that, has no threats at all to its existence. We're protected by 2 oceans. And, the government isn't going to be overthrown anytime soon. And so they should give us all the freedoms in the world because there's nothing threatening them. It's like giving us freedoms doesn't threaten them, and still they want to regulate our freedom, because ultimately they care about their empire and maintaining that more than they do about their values. They don't have values, of course. So are you there, Ian, or did you get stuck? Oh, you're there.
Can you
okay.
see me?
I can see you.
Mhm.
I wasn't sure if so no, that was any other, Greg, do you have thoughts on the this topic of the genocide and
Yeah. Yeah, recently I did a little side project researching how many Slavic people were killed who were not soldiers. It was upwards of 20 million in Yugoslavia, Poland, and then the Soviet Union.
Yeah, so
Yeah, so, I mean,
Belarus, as a percentage of population, was the hardest hit. It was about 1/4, and of
What
course
group?
that wasn't Belarus. Belarus was the most impacted country, or state, I should say. About 1/4, and of course those casualties weren't evenly distributed. So in those areas that were occupied the longest, mostly in western and central Belarus, is as many as 1/3 to half of the population in some areas. So,
but what we're highlighting here is the narrative and how our understanding of that time, the mainstream understanding of that time, has been manufactured to prioritize, the suffering and the hardship experienced by one group to the while ignoring the other kinds of suffering. And so it's interesting to think about what was behind that effort, because that was an intentional thing to highlight, spotlight, and put on a pedestal the suffering experienced by European Jews, at the expense of Slavs, like you're saying, and other groups. But yeah, what can be
3
said
million
about
Soviet
why?
POWs
Yeah, the Romani,
starved to death.
Gypsies. Yeah, even homosexuals. You know, but yeah, it's. I don't know how to carry on this aspect of the conversation because, I mean, what you're saying, Billy Bob, is so obvious, especially when it comes to Gaza, and the way it's being treated. I'm just absolutely horrified, and offended, and also, uh, you want to feel when a situation like this arises, and it supports what you thought about the power structure in the West and specifically United States all of your life, and it's verified, it's validated at this level of um, brutish, animalistic behavior. Uh, I like just sit idly by, and at best they'll make some sort of excuse and try to rationalize this notion of a rationale for the brutality. It's just utterly disgusting what's going on. It's almost on occasion I find it personally unbearable and difficult to function on a personal level, knowing what's going on in Gaza. It's absolutely.
I mean, it's
Absolutely
reminiscent of CNN just having Joseph Goebbels on during the the height of the Holocaust. Just putting out the point of view of the Nazi government, You know, that's
Exactly.
what CNN does every
We're
day
in
when they trot
discussing
out,
strategy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
you know, when they trot out Israeli spokespeople just to you know, to try and sell this and justify it. You know, they might as well have been doing the same thing, you know, at the height of the Nazi genocide. But
And at
so
this,
yeah,
I just want to say, at this level, the United States is supplying the weaponry and the wherewithal to carry on this genocide. So it's not just the Zionists in Israel.
yeah.
It's the United States. It's the U.S. And it's, once again, validates talking about Vietnam or Indonesia or any of these other circumstances where
It
millions have
totally
been killed.
destroys the liberal worldview that is maintained by a majority of citizens. And again, as a communist, it totally validates everything I've always thought to be true, you know, about imperialism, about the West. And so, you know, it ought to be a real mask off moment and a moment of enlightenment for the masses to clue into reality. But you know, the media is doing their best to obfuscate and to you know, confuse people, which is, you know, which is their job, which again just totally validates my understanding of what their job is. But anyway, other thoughts on genocides in particular, or liberalism? um, I can pivot to other goings on to Ukraine, but I don't want to stop anybody's train of thought.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, what's
Okay.
our government been saying lately? A little bit about food and then mostly hurry it up? Isn't it?
Yeah. So recently, who brought this to my well, I mean, I heard it somewhere on Telegram or something, and then Carla was mentioning that Tony Blair and Jared Kushner have approached President Trump, the real estate mogul, and they're selling him on, hey, here's what we got to do. We got to find homes for the Palestinians, and you know what? We are going to turn this area into the greatest Gazan Riviera. And I mean, everything's going to be named, you know, Trump Tower, Trump Plaza, Trump Boulevard. We're going to have casinos. We're going to have 5-star hotels. And I could just see that it's not really that difficult to sell Trump on this. And of course, even the anti-Trump Democrats, you know, aren't going to be opposing the genocide, as we can see. I mean, you think this would be a great political football for the Democrats to start going after genocide Trump, but do you think they don't want it because they actually support Trump in the genocide? So you know, it remains to be seen how much of this can be pulled off, and how much the international community is going to say fuck no. You know, I know right now the spokespeople, the Israeli government, you know, they are just really giddy because they're like, "Whoa, the world's letting us do this! Like, who
Right.
knew we could get away with this? Let's do it." It's literally what they're saying, you know, in front of the camera. So
Right, and they just ended their daily humanitarian pause. I saw.
well, yeah. So my understanding is they're going to militarily evacuate Gaza City. Gaza City is in the north. They definitely want to push everyone south. They want to concentrate everyone in the south and move them out of the north. So that's going to be what they're going to be engaged in, and that's going to lead to a lot more deaths, a lot more destruction. It's going to further their efforts to eventually, you know, force them out of Palestine, either into Egypt or into Jordan. But yeah, they're really trying very hard to identify a country that will take, you know, these people, and then they're going to do their best to, you know, make it happen. And I don't think they can. I mean, I'm hoping that they can't. I think it's a long shot. You know, everybody is opposed to even, giving it lip service, or, people are opposed to endorsing it openly. But, it's definitely still an open question as far as I'm concerned. Like it's still up in the air whether they can be successful or not. I'm thinking they can't be and they won't be, but I don't have certainty in that respect.
It's so tempting to them too because of the liquid natural gas and oil that's just offshore of Gaza that belongs now supposedly to the Palestinians, and they'll just take it, and so they've got a source of income to help generate revenue to put up casinos, like you say.
Yeah.
It's
so tempting. I mean, it's a historic achievement for the Zionist project, which is Greater Israel. It would be historic. Like there is so much anticipation and so much, people, pushing for this for a lot of reasons. So the resource, oil, natural gas, just expanding Greater Israel, controlling the Gaza Strip. So on Telegram this morning, I read that, Christian Palestinians in Gaza City have refused to evacuate the churches. And then you have Israeli spokespeople saying, well, if you want to be a Christian martyr, you can be a Christian martyr, but we're still going to go ahead with our operation to totally occupy Gaza City and concentrate, all the Palestinians there in the south. So, and it's just amazing that in this day and age, they're just doing it so openly and blatantly. That ought to be a very enlightening thing for people to see.
You have that ultimate Christian, Mike Huckabee, not doing a goddamn thing about it. There's nothing Christian about these people, and it's beyond the pale. It's just heinous, and having to sit here and not really be able to do much about it. It's frustrating. I haven't felt this kind of personal frustration for a long time. Part of it is I can't get out to go to rallies and that sort of thing, like I'm accustomed to doing. But it's just possibly the worst thing in my lifetime that I've seen, that I've personally witnessed, and that includes the Vietnam War and up, because that's when I was old enough to understand what was going on.
So I wanted to pivot a little bit to the economic war against Russia, and there was an effort by the Trump administration to force, of course, China and India and Brazil into stop, importing Russian energy and Russian goods. And it seems from the words of people like Peter Navarro and other people associated with the Trump economic team that they were genuinely surprised that India refused to stop importing Russian energy. Even though I think the EU still imports Russian energy, and I think the United States might even import Russian energy.
It does.
So Peter Navarro was just shocked that India said, no, we're going to continue and you can go ahead and sanction us and it's not going to change our mind. But what's really great about that story, at least so far, and it's tough to, give a full endorsement of the Modi government, but just like it is with the Erdogan government, they give lip service and, they look like they're doing the right thing, but it's hard to tell for sure. But immediately after those sanctions hit, India negotiated an even bigger trade agreement with Russia. And of course, they also went to China to, normalize and improve relations there. And so that is just so detrimental to the efforts of the Western imperialists. And it just seems like they're so incompetent. To what degree are you guys surprised that Trump was surprised and that India did what they're doing. Because I kind of thought it was like 50-50, like India could capitulate and India could throw their lot in with the West. Now, they haven't done it historically. They've been a non-aligned country. Even from the beginning of the SMO, they've taken a surprisingly, in my opinion, neutral stance. But when the U.S. comes along to try to bully them and cajole them into, leaving Russia and China and aligning with the West, they did the exact opposite. So, I mean, I think that's a good sign. It's very heartening. And I think it kind of just goes to the incompetence of the Trump administration.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm surprised. I didn't know. Like, I remember you said, I even remember when you said that it was you thought it was a 50-50. It could go either way. And I agreed with you at the time because we couldn't know, of course. In the general public, we couldn't know. I think it really boils down to when there's a threat of sanctions, the party that is threatened has to assess are the sanctions worse than the loss of trade that they're threatening. And so with India, I assume they just decided that what the USA could offer was outweighed by what their current deal with Russia, which is probably true because India, I mean, what's the USA going to give India that's more valuable than the cheap Russian oil they're getting? Well, it's probably not much, honestly. And the trade, I'm not too familiar on it. I think I saw a number thrown around. It was like 8 to 10 billion in trade between. That might not be correct. I just saw it on the internet today. So it's a significant amount, but it's not huge either. And I think that's good. It's a problem with threatening. The closer you get to Russia, the more difficult it is to persuade those countries with sanctions, with the exception, of course, of Finland and the Baltics. If they're politically inclined to be opposed to Russia, anyway, that's easy, but to persuade them. But other countries that aren't so inclined, like in the South Caucasus, or just any country that's especially like in the Caucasus, where you have Armenia or Azerbaijan, where basically 90% of their trade is with Russia. Obviously, there's nothing you can really offer them to stop doing that. I guess that's also the case with India. They're just getting too much from Russia to want to cut that off.
I was just looking up the amount of oil. They're close to 2 million barrels per day they buy from Russia. I mean, even if they wanted to stop buying it, where would they get it? Is there an extra?
Plus, they're making money reselling it on the world's market.
Yeah.
Why would they stop?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah. Well, so
and that's the thing. Even with Europe, even with the people who quote unquote stop, broke. Putin's, it's Putin's weaponized energy. We all remember those headlines. Putin is weaponizing energy. And so all these countries like, we're going to stop funding Putin's war machine by not buying Russian oil. And what they did was they stopped buying directly from Russia, who's selling it to them cheap, like almost criminally cheap. They stopped doing that and then buy it from third parties like India. And pay more. So it's like you're showing Putin's who's boss by deliberately paying more for Russian oil. So that's
Now you brought up the fact that every country's got to do a cost benefit analysis, but in addition to that cost benefit analysis, that's just math, right? Like there's also other factors. So you mentioned the political factors. If you're already ideologically and politically predisposed to oppose Russia and to throw your lot in with the Western imperialism, but it's also sovereignty. And so questions of sovereignty. And so even if the U.S. was able to offer a little bit more than they were demanding that India lose through stopping to import Russian oil, there's the question of sovereignty, and people don't like to be bullied. And so that also factors into the equation.
You have the supreme bully now too in power in the U.S.
So Peter Navarro, this really happened, at least according to Telegram. I didn't see it on the news shows. He was being interviewed, and his interviewer thought he misspoke because he said, he called it, he called the war in Ukraine Modi's war. And the interviewer tried to correct him and say, "You mean Putin's war, right?" He's like, "No, I mean Modi's war." So they're so angry at Modi for not going along with, this bullying, and they're calling it. It's all his fault because he continues to buy Russian oil. And if he would stop buying Russian oil, the war would end. And since they're not doing that, it's now Modi's war. Like, how do you think that's going to go over? Like, that's not going to go over well with India. Go ahead, Carlo.
No, I was going to say that, and the United States and the Trump regime in particular keeps underestimating the influence of BRICS. And India is a BRICS country. Saudi Arabia, which wants to become a BRICS country, has just struck a deal with China to pay for Chinese goods with yuan, through yuan, not through the dollar. So this kind of decentralization has a huge appeal around the world. I mean, this kind of multipolarity has a huge appeal around the world. Yeah. That's not being. I don't know how dense American lawmakers are, but they don't seem to get the picture of what's going on, and they're grossly underestimating.
Yeah. It seems that the whole war against Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine was terrible for their interests if they're interested in, destroying BRICS and containing China, because that just drove Russia, closer to China. And likewise with how they're dealing with India. It's like they're not able to peel off any of these countries, these huge, important countries, and they're pushing them tighter and closer together. And that just seems totally incompetent and the exact wrong thing you want to do. But you know what? Trump is, if he's, he might not be doing well on those fronts, but he's definitely a rubber stamp for the Zionist genocide. Yes. And so, in that regard, he's definitely furthering the interests of a particular faction, even though he's doing miserably with regards to the whole effort to contain China. But maybe, you know what? I think it's sequencing. Brian Berletic talks about strategic sequencing. And so we're focusing on this now. We're going to get the Gaza thing situated. We're going to get the Iran thing situated. Then we'll get the Ukraine thing situated. And then we can, point all of our guns and go after China. But, yeah.
Well, it seems to me like South Korea and Japan have sort of soured on all of that.
Yes.
So the United States, what does it do? It sends 2,000 paratroopers to the Philippines as a way of tightening the noose around China. It's just, I mean, it's ludicrous.
Not to mention the 4,000 Marines on the ships on the coast of Venezuela. Yeah,
exactly. I was going to add that. It's ludicrous.
So it's just more than it's too big to manage. The empire is unmanageable. The forces against it are too great, and they're floundering. Go ahead, Ian. I'm sorry, sir.
I was going to add is with India is there is some sort of deal being negotiated between India and Russia for workers. Because frankly, because I'm going to be politically incorrect here. The Russian public's kind of tired with the migrants from Central Asia, the Muslim-centric migrants from Central Asia, especially after the Crocus City Hall attack. People are just, and there were several high-profile crimes in the news also. People are just tired of them. So, and of course, and the Russian government doesn't want to decrease the number of migrants. They like the number of migrants they have. So, and it was reported in RT that they're looking to import 1 million Indian workers, apparently to replace the workers they're turning away or deporting from other countries. And India's, love it or hate it, India's main export is labor, right? And they try to get into the USA. They get into every premium labor markets they can, right? With the top premium market being the USA because the wages are highest, obviously. Another premium market being Europe. Russia is a market they haven't been able to get into. And the main reason they haven't is because Russia has these friendship treaties with those other former Soviet states. And it's just when there's another migrant group that has that many advantages, it's just really tough for a person from India to get into the Russian economy and do well. So it's looking like they're negotiating some sort of thing to bring in more Indian workers. And so that I'm sure is important to India. And the problem is if you turn around and say, oh, well, you know what? I'm best friends. I'm BFFs with the USA. I'm going to stop trading with you. Obviously, other deals they were working out go out the window. No 1 million Indians to Russia, whatever they were, any kind of economic or labor or migration partnership.
No, it's more incentives to tell the West to go fuck itself for sure.
Right, exactly.
Is Spaz okay? I hear him spazzing out.
He's spazzing out. That's what he does. I'm sorry. You can hear him. I throw him treats once in a while to get him distracted.
Okay.
But yeah. As far as Trump goes, I saw what Carlo mentioned, the Venezuela headline, and I don't know if I agree with training all the guns on China because let's be honest, 2,000 here, 4,000 there. That's nothing. It's posturing. We sent 2,000 guys to this island or 2,000 guys to these ships to this port. It's nothing. It's literally nothing. If they wanted to be serious in a war with China, or threatening a war with China, or setting up some sort of porcupine strategy where they're forcing China to take military actions to show China is the aggressor they attacked first, they would need to do something very serious, like sending some serious weapons to Taiwan. They're doing, yes, and they haven't done.
And again, it's about sequencing, and so I don't think if they wanted a conflict with China, they could create it overnight by telling that government to declare independence, by, like you said, shipping certain weapon systems over there. So yeah, it's clear at this point they're not ready, and they don't feel like it's time to initiate a conflict with China. I just assume, and most people do, that that they're prepared. They're taking steps to get to where they are prepared, so they can do that when they want to do that. But yeah, they got their hands full for sure with the whole Russia thing, and again, that's why Trump has been doing this. The summits in Alaska, and then the Monday meeting, and the ongoing efforts to kind of extract the United States from that conflict is part and parcel of the pivot to China. I mean, again, I think that's true, and
that's the problem, though. If they're serious about going after China, they need to make peace and befriend Russia, which Russia is open to being not unconditional partners, and they're not necessarily going to attack other people on the behalf of USA, but they're interested in being economic and political partners with the USA. Putin, in particular, is interested.
Absolutely.
In this, so it would be easy, but
all the U.S. has to do is change its behavior.
But they haven't done that. So, and I think if they're serious about going after China, they need to make peace with Russia. You can't fight both China and Russia. It's not doable. So I don't see that. And I don't see them even attempting to take steps like that. So,
well, I see a struggle, right? I mean, isn't there a struggle going on within the Western ruling class? There's a division where, it's like Europe is opposed to and angry with certain things that Trump says and does.
They capitulated. They agreed to his 15% tariffs. And there was a news article that went out a few days ago, saying that it wasn't even a negotiation. The USA's team just came in, made demands, and Europe accepted them. European Union just accepted them. They didn't even argue it because they were in it. It was done out of fear because they're just scared that the USA will wash its hands of Ukraine and Eastern Europe. So they just capitulated. They preemptively capitulated to Trump's demands. So they're not even. I mean, they tweet angry about him sometimes, but tweets aren't policy, and their policy is capitulation to what Trump wants. You know, he said, increase your spending. Hey, I want you to buy more American weapons. They did it. He said, we're not going to give Ukraine weapons for free anymore. Europe has to pay for them. Now they do. Now they pay. And Trump said that. I think it wasn't a lie. I think that's accurate. He said they stopped free shipments to Ukraine. They're still sending weapons to Ukraine, but Europe is forced to pay for them, and they have to cut. And they have to do all these awful things themselves. They have to cut their pensions. They have to what's his name? I keep forgetting. It's not Schultz. I keep forgetting his name. The German.
Merz.
Merz. Yes, he said that we can't. The welfare state is unaffordable now, right? They pride themselves. These European countries pride themselves for being welfare states, and I don't even say welfare states in the sense as like it's a bad thing. They just have these very strong cradle grave welfare systems with very strong, healthcare and social safety nets, and they're sacrificing all of it so they can buy more American weapons.
Yeah.
And so that's complete victory for Trump. That is a legitimate feather in his cap, forcing Europe to capitulate. Some of his other projects haven't worked out for him, but that one definitely worked out for him.
Can he, can he get a good relationship with Russia? I don't know. I think in order for him to, have a good relationship with Russia, there's got to be a fair and just end of the conflict. And it doesn't seem that, Europe is willing or prepared, and neither is Ukraine, to agree to a fair and just end to the Ukraine conflict. And because of that, Trump's inclination to turn Russia into an ally, or at least a political partner, an economic partner, is going to fail. And it's like he would like to do that, but it's not within his power to do that because he doesn't directly control Ukraine, and he doesn't directly control the European Union. And so what he would like to do just can't do.
No, I disagree. I don't think, because all of the information I've seen, I've seen quite a bit of information, and none of it looked like being pro-Russia, right? So it's America, and I think I said this in the last show. It's America first. I sometimes feel like it should be Israel first, but it's America first, which means they're not putting the collective interests of, they're not putting any collective interests above American interests, and it's just American interests, which isn't isolationism. I think a lot of people are hoping for isolationism, but it's not. It's a form of imperialism. It's a form of very pragmatic, Machiavellian policy, but it's not friendly towards Russia. So basically what it means, if there's no benefits to being hostile with Russia, they'll stop. Because I think that's the basis of the whole America First policy. If it's beneficial to us to be hostile with Russia, they will. But if it's not beneficial, then they'll stop. Now, I think the problem, because it's true. I mean, Trump, I think, gets made fun of for saying he could end the war in 24 hours, but I think he actually could if he wanted to. I mean, they could stop just selling, not even sell weapons. They would say we're completely we're not selling, not even selling any more weapons intended for Ukraine. We're not giving them any more intelligence. We're just completely backing out of the war. That would be enough because it's understood in Russia that the USA can't force Europeans to stop being involved in Ukraine. And I think they're not even scared of Europe being. No one feels like Europe is this huge leviathan, or just industrial giants that can replace the USA. Everybody understands it's not.
Is Trump trying to get himself to a place where he can do that, or will he not do that?
I don't think Trump knows what he wants. The problem, so I think on the Russian side, there's a problem that Russia does not have much to offer the USA in terms of economic partnership. Because, since the USA came into existence, Russia has generally been on good, for the majority of the USA's existence, we've been on good terms with Russia, but only once been an actual formal ally of Russia, right, in World War II. That was the only time. The rest of the time, we were never, even when we were on good terms, it was never even talk of being allies. And the reason why is we don't have any conflicts of interest with them, like with the British, because obviously there's many conflicts of interest with the British Empire and potential reasons to fight them, but there weren't any for Russia. But on the flip side of that, there wasn't really much to offer either, right? There's a pretty finite, what can we really trade with them? There's some trade between Russia and the USA, but I don't think there's a huge potential for growth in trade, right? It's not like Trump, if Trump lifted sanctions, trade with Russia would go up, times 1,000, it'd go up a little, maybe it would even double, but it would go from like 5 billion to 10 billion, right? It's not some huge era of prosperity for us. So there's that. And also, I think the other issue is, I think Trump is misunderstanding this. Is very strange because Trump and Trump's team are acting like they're a mediator. Oh, we're this third party mediator, and they're not. It's like you're a participant in the war. Even if you're not directly sending troops, you are a participant because you're giving intelligence. You're actively supporting one combatant, which makes you a participant. You're not a neutral party that's mediating. Saudi Arabia could be a mediator. China could be a mediator. Even sort of Turkey could be a mediator, but not the USA. So it's when you misunderstand the situation that yourself and your role in the situation that badly, it's kind of you're setting yourself up to fail too.
Yeah, the U.S. instigated the whole thing in Ukraine. They're the reason the war is happening.
Yeah. And so the whole impetus behind it was to Yugoslavianize, Balkanize Russia. That was the objective. And so that objective was heavily invested in. It was, planned for years, funded, and ultimately they did their very best to try and achieve that objective. So now there's the realization that objective will not be reached and we need to recalibrate. And so we want to maybe freeze it. We'll go deal with some other things and maybe come back to it later. But that's why Trump is willing to, stop the attack. So he's willing to stop the military shipments that are for free. He's willing to stop the sanctions, and he's willing to initiate, some economic ties, some economic development, because of the failed policy, the policy that of the previous administration to balkanize Russia that has failed. And because of that failure, he's okay. It doesn't hurt him because he's still calling it Biden's war, and he's okay normalizing relations with Russia and ending the effort to overthrow them and balkanize them. But guess who's not interested in ending that effort? Ukraine and the EU. And so and he can't cajole the EU and the Ukraine to end their efforts to do that. They want to double down. They want to outlast Trump. They want to wait for Trump to leave and hope they'll have better luck with his successor. But in the meantime,
Ukraine
has one.
The problem is Ukraine itself is not going to last another 3 years. It's impossible for Ukraine to last.
Yeah, no, that's what I believe, and that's why I said, by the end of September, we're going to have some kind of a big resolution.
The problem is that Europe and Ukraine can't. Go ahead, Carla.
I'm sorry. I just want to say, But if the U.S. had the weapons, Trump not sending them is irrelevant. The United States has always found ways to send weapons to people, circumventing the executive branch. I mean, that's what the black budget for the Central Intelligence Agency's for. You learned
Yeah.
anything about Iran?
I think, yeah,
Contra,
you're right. They might be out of
was it.
weapons, and there's nothing they can do. There's no weapon they can send that's going to make a difference. And
They
so
don't
that's
have
Remember
them.
what this giant announced was the ERAMs, the extended range, right? The cruise missile, cheap cruise missiles, 3,000 of them starting now.
Yeah, no,
I
that's
mean,
a
they
headline.
found something, yeah.
And who knows what what the reality is behind the headline. I mean, are they going to start developing those weapons now to be giving later? Are
Supposedly
they
there's-
already there? Are they already in
No.
Ukraine? We
It'll
don't know.
be years before they're ready.
Yeah, that could be. That definitely could be.
They're saying weeks, and all of them by the end of the year, right?
Well, I think I'm trying. Maybe it's Scott Ritter, but he said that possibly by the end of the year they could have 7 or 8 ready, but the numbers they're talking about will take years. So, I mean, I don't really know.
Yeah.
That's what I would bank.
I mean, I got the impression that they're like 500-pound bombs with jets and fins attached to them. Some kind of navigation system.
Yeah. So, yeah, because Russia's had the big advantage with these bombs that they're using on the front.
The glide bombs.
Are the smallest version, and then there's like a 1,000. There's like a 3,000 version, and supposedly, Russia has just mass produced these, and they're using them to great effect. And so, we're willing to give Ukraine a whole, thousands of these smallest kind of bombs, glide bombs that I don't think they have to be launched from aircraft. So the ones that Russia has are launched.
They do.
Okay, these are all aircraft launched. They're not land, surface to surface. So, but yeah, it's hard to know what that means. There's definitely a headline, and it could be, Trump is trying to say things to placate his opposition that wants more war, because he's really good at giving all the sides a little bit to keep them off his back while he works for whatever interests, he's working for. But it is very difficult to know with certainty. And, this week I've been watching a lot of analysts, and they're all saying the same thing. It's like, fucking Trump. It's like, it's really hard to figure out, what he's really after. And like Ian said, it might be because Trump doesn't know what he's really after. Trump's after, benefiting Trump, and he doesn't know exactly how to do that on any given hour.
Apparently can't pass up a profiteering opportunity.
Yeah.
That's definitely classic Trump for sure. If he can benefit. So yeah, Trump Riviera on the Gaza. But I don't know. Okay, we'll ask Ian momentarily. Greg, I know we were going to spend a few moments, and I know Ian and Carlo really enjoy talking Chinese history. And so I know you had prepared a few slides on our ongoing China history discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I can, if you want to put those in the chat here, I can put them on screen.
Okay.
But how do we bring this topic? How do we introduce this topic?
How do you want to introduce it?
I mean, it's my perspective is that, there's an ideological war where you're engaged in an ideological warfare as part of the class struggle. And so the class struggle is, the wealthy elites, the ownership class, have certain interests that are in opposition to the interests of the masses. The interests of the masses, another word for that is democracy. And in order for us to have democracy and a representative government, the biggest obstacle to that is the ownership class and their oligarchy and their dictatorship in the West that, is the one that decides all the policies that matter. Our economic policies, our foreign policies, policies of war and peace. And so our oligarchs, to justify and to maintain and perpetuate their rule and their oligarchy, they engage in ideological warfare. And so they want to confuse people. They want to turn people against a rational understanding of what's going on. And so there's ideological warfare. They want to make capitalism synonymous with success and prosperity and freedom, and they want to say that socialism is also commensurate with poverty and gulags and human rights violations, right? So that's kind of the ideology that they want to proliferate. But in reality, things are a bit more complex. And so, for instance, we talk about China, and China, engaged in big shifts in its short history, and so we talk about why they engaged in those shifts. And, within the mainstream, there are different schools of thought about China. And so a lot of people in the West think that China is no longer communist, right? That, when Deng came, he reformed China's economy, and now China's capitalist, or at least state capitalist. And, because of that, well, they're no better than the United States. They're just as bad of an empire as the United States. And we cannot support the United States, but we cannot support China. And so, we're just fucked and fuck everything. And, so that's one school of thought. But when we look at Chinese history, there's through an ideological lens, there is definitely a consistent way to understand and appreciate what China is doing, and that we can say embraces a pragmatic understanding of Marxism, of communism. Because in the Western perspective, communism is some dogmatic thing that if you allow free markets or allow private ownership, then you're ipso facto not communist. You're capitalist now. And so I think there's just a perspective that we can elucidate that is consistent and explains a fuller, more detailed definition of communism and of Marxism that embraces markets and embraces a measure of private ownership. But anyway, I've said way too much, and it's your guys' fault for asking me to introduce it. Okay, here. This is Greg's PRC policy spectrum. So this is a little bit involved. So it's an interesting spectrum, I guess, for learning purposes. On the left, you've got egalitarianism. You have lack of private ownership, and then on the right, you have hierarchies and inequality. Can you say
That's
some
the
words?
right-left spectrum generally, in political theory. How much?
Okay. I would probably make the case that that such things ought to be disregarded and abolished, because I think they get people thinking in binaries that aren't helpful. But can you just elaborate on what is being explained here? What ideas are conveyed here?
Sure. I mean, when we went over theory, I think last time I was on here, Marx specified that during the primary phase of socialism, which is before you eliminate scarcity and class, there's something he called bourgeois right, which is not property rights, but inequalities that persist into socialism. he said, socialism comes with capitalism and the blood from it all over. And this is one of the things he thought socialism stage would have to endure, is to each according to work, meaning the people who work harder and who have the most skills are going to get paid the most.
Yeah.
The
No,
Mao.
that was yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, that's definitely a feature of socialism. Is it remuneration or remuneration? Anyway, there's a word, remuneration,
Hey.
based on merit, based on work. So that is definitely a principle of socialism. So go ahead.
Yeah, so the Mao era, I would say, is a back and forth between more traditional pay for work versus attempts to equalize pay and get rid of inequalities for skill, and even like managers versus workers and skilled versus unskilled, and even productivity stopped being paid differently. So the tension during the Mao era is between these back and forths between attempts at radical egalitarianism and then swinging back to some kind of technocratic correction. And there were two or three, depending on how you look at it, during Mao's era where there were corrections. Let's go. This is our full outline that we've gone over before. We can maybe read through this briefly, and then we'll dive into the Mao era to look at it a little more in depth.
So we had the New Democracy, which was similar to Lenin's New Economic Project policy, which was from 49 to 52. And then Socialist Deepening from 52 to 56. Perceived capitalist backsliding, Korean War, resource mobilization, Soviet aid and influence. And then an ultra left turn in 56 through 76. That was, resulted from the Sino-Soviet split and the Western trade embargo.
Withdraw of Soviet advisors.
Yeah. And then and then Dan came in and obviously did some economic reforms, and then we can perceive what she did as somewhat returning
Correction.
to, you say a correction, a leftward correction. So I think there's utility in that basic kind of understanding, right? But I think that it's also very limiting and it's very constraining in just having such a rigid binary where it's you're just looking at well, we went to the left and then we went a bit to the right and we went to the left again and then a bit to the right and then the left. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know.
I think that's the dialectics of the development, is this back and forth.
So dialectics is you have contradictions, and then there's a resolution to the contradictions, and that resolution leads to more contradictions, and then you have to have a resolution, to those contradictions, and it's just so on and so forth. And no, I mean, so
pure Hegelian, pure Hegel,
pure Hegel.
So I broke this 20 years approximately from 1958 to 1976 into 6 different phases. So there's 3 back and forths here.
So So what do you think is the benefit of this understanding? Like how does it in the ideological struggle that we're in? Because what I am apt to do is to take the mainstream understanding and explain how that's stupid, right? And so I want to talk to Western leftists who are anti-China and say that China is communist or capitalist, and tell them that they're stupid, that you don't know what communism is, you don't know what Marxism is. And then the people that say, well, China's communist and that's a bad thing, if only they were capitalists, they would be doing so much better. I want to tell those people how fucking stupid they are, and so my interest is in addressing common misconceptions and misunderstandings, and telling people how they ought to perceive things. And I think how they ought to perceive things is that Marxism and communism is a pragmatic approach to identifying and pursuing the best interests of the working class majority. But when you do that, you realize that you come up against your primary obstacle to that is the best interest of the oligarch minority. And so that oligarch minority, is an obstacle and in opposition to your project of benefiting the working class majority. And so to me, that's the entirety of Marxism and communism. And it's not dogmatic, it's pragmatic. And so what we see is in China, we see them identifying and pursuing the best interests of the majority within an ever-changing system of material conditions. So because the Sino-Soviet split and the Western trade embargo put certain conditions on China that they then had to react to and to deal with. And meanwhile, they went to work trying to improve the existing material conditions. And so once they were able to improve the existing material conditions, for instance, by getting the West to end its embargo, then they changed policy to take advantage of those new material conditions, which they had achieved the improvement of. So so to me, it's like given my interest in putting forth this understanding and detracting or deconstructing other people's understandings, either from the left or from the right in the West. How does this framework help us to do that?
I don't know if it's really designed to deal with anti-communism or liberal critiques so much as explain. I mean, the thing that I find interesting is how people viewed Deng, right? He was. It's a radical shift from any other, I think, socialist development strategy. Short or since the NEP in the early 20s in the Soviet Union. So I think looking at this back and forth, and to the extent Mao went very far left, we can understand Deng's more radical reforms from that perspective. And I'm also not I'm rejecting the idea that his intent was to restore capitalism and do a counter-revolution. So the question is, why did he need to make such radical changes? That's things that motivates looking at these stages.
Because he saw the condition of the people in general, and he wanted to make adjustments that would bring about what Billy Bob is talking about, the advancement of the working class.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what China has accomplished in an extraordinary measure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it's like the material conditions became available to improve things once the West ended their embargo and normalized relations. And so China took advantage of that, and we can see Deng really took advantage of those new opportunities to great effect, to unprecedented effect. And so again, I think, I would argue that that was the communist and it was the Marxist thing to do, is to, take advantage of the existing material conditions in order to benefit the masses. And so, but you would agree, Greg, I mean, you agree that Deng was correct to implement these changes and to harness a measure of private ownership and direct foreign investment.
I mean, I don't know if it was correct. There was another, there was a technocratic, if we go back to spectrum. There were two other options here. The most successful period, I think, by most measures, was the Stalinist, period. Similar to how the period from the 30s through the 50s was the most economically productive in the Soviet Union. So these two formulas were also in play during Mao's era. So, I mean, I think Deng's, like you said, the international situation had dramatically improved by the late 80s. Not only there was detente with the US, but also the Soviet Sino split was winding down. And in the late 80s, Gorbachev went to China and basically capitulated to them. So they were out of all of the sieges they had been under. And the economic situation was kind of grim too. This is yearly growth rates through the entire history of China. So there were two crises during Mao's era. This is the Great Leap Forward here, where growth collapsed, and then the Cultural Revolution here, and then there was a back and forth at the end of Mao's life where there was a technocratic reforms that came in the late 60s and then were kind of pushed back towards the end of his life. So when Deng came in here, things had been bad, and the agriculture situation was even worse. It was, they'd barely, this is per capita, I think. They had barely improved over Mao's lifetime. So one of the first changes Deng made was to put back the ability of peasants to have their own plots and sell grain, which improved the food situation quickly. So in 68, Mao declared the Cultural Revolution was basically over and sent the PLA out to administer the country and try to get production going and agriculture harvest working. And then things kind of slipped back. There were new radical campaigns, and supposedly technocrats were losing their positions again that they had started to regain. But some of the most extreme stuff, like schools being closed, didn't happen again. So, and then after Mao, there was, this brief technocratic period from 75 to 78, which was plausibly going to work. It was putting back a lot of the things that had helped in the past, except there was huge debt being generated, which caused a lot of opposition and probably torpedoed a reform without changing the ownership structure, is it was going to require debt. So which Deng's program didn't.
So, um,
So in answer to
you
your
have,
question, the Deng's ideas got them out of the debt trap they were about to fall into.
Yeah, I know they were, they had a policy of self-sufficiency, of course. And so I don't think, I mean, through until the end of the Western trade embargo, they weren't incurring any kind of debts. But yeah, once that embargo lifted, I know that they did some borrowing, but I mean, I just kind of
Yeah, they were
see.
trying to import factories like wholesale from Japan and stuff that was very expensive.
But I see there's a long transition because you got to understand while you're implementing specific economic policies, you have to justify them, and especially when you're doing like a 180, right? And so the thing is, as a politician, when you are embarking on a economy of self-sufficiency, you have no choice but to kind of argue that this is the best thing for us to do. We need to be self-sufficient, and you're going to sell it to the people, any way that you can. And so the thing is that some people are going to buy it, right? And so like the Gang of Four, they really believe that self-sufficiency was the best way to go, even when clearly superior options became available. And so there's just an aspect of governing where you've got to condition and prepare the people to accept these huge 180-degree changes. And so, you've got to do it gradually. You've got to roll it out with campaigns. And so, if maybe your rhetoric during the embargo was that it's the evil imperialists are trying to crush us, we must be resilient and show them how strong we are and be self-sufficient. But guess what? When the empire changes its policies, now you have to explain to your people that, hey, it's okay to do business. It's okay if these imperialists come and buy things. And so there's a whole, cultural and informational aspect to these policy changes that got to take place. So there's a transition period from, and it's dictated by what is possible. So it was not possible to trade with the West, to access Western markets, to access Western technology, to receive Western foreign investment until Nixon and Kissinger met, and they put the hatchet in the embargo. And then you have a long transition period before you can really start taking advantage. And it wasn't even until 2000 that the China was allowed to be a member of the World Trade Organization, and so that gave them access and opportunity that they didn't even have in the 80s or the 90s to take advantage of. And so it just takes time and it takes shifting. But what you can see throughout is that the Chinese Communist Party is interested in, doing whatever is, pursuing the best interests of the people within the constraints that are offered by the material conditions. And at the same time, they're working to change those material conditions to allow for even more opportunities. And this is what socialism is. This is what communism is, especially within a global capitalist system. And so due to the fact of it being a global capitalist system, you are constrained as to what you could do if it was a global socialist system. Like if all the countries in the planet were socialist, all the countries were interested in pursuing the best interests of their working classes, you would be able to do way, way, way more than you are under the constraints of a global capitalist system. So, some of those constraints, I had a big argument in, not to change the subject too much, but, people saying, well, China should do more about the genocide, right? And that's a big, Greg, I don't want to change
Go ahead.
the topic too much, but that is definitely a schism. It's a divide that is taking place on the left, and there's a lot of leftists who are angry that China is not doing more. They're not throwing their weight around. They're not engaged in any kind of serious effort to sanction Israel, to end the genocide. And so, I really disagree with these people because, they don't understand, the constraints that China faces due to the fact that it's still a capitalist world, and China really can't stop the United States from genociding the Palestinians. And sure, they could sacrifice themselves, they could martyr themselves, self-immolate, light themselves on fire in protest. But what good would that do humanity? So anyway,
I mean, we should address that during the Mao era, China did have a way more international foreign policy, right? They were sending arms and,
well, what did they have to lose? Did they have anything?
Well, yeah, right. They were already completely under siege. So yeah, it was a different picture.
So and that's kind of, again, is the point, is it's not an ideology. Marxism and communism is not an ideology based on dogmatism. It's pragmatic. It's based on a pursuit of the best interest of the working class majority within the confines of a material conditions which are constantly changing and evolving. And while they're pursuing the best interest of the working class within those constraints, they're also working to improve the material conditions so that further opportunities become available. And so that's what we're seeing right now with the displace of Western hegemony, right? It's being displaced. So China is displacing the West in Africa. They're trying to displace them in Central and South America, in Bolivia, in Chile. They're developing ports and offering an alternative to Western institutions like the World Bank or the IMF. China is becoming an alternate source of lending and revenue. So this is a process that's taking place, but it's clearly threatening to Western imperialism, which is why we're seeing what we're seeing. But I really do feel like I'm making you guys listen to a lecture, and I look at your faces and I feel sorry for you. I'm sorry I did that.
Well, and Venezuela now, which is in the news, but you make a very clear and accurate point, Billy Bob, when you an important distinction, when you say that the whole process that China is going through is to benefit the people. Whereas if you look at the West, and capitalism, and this is the distinction, that's not the objective of capitalism. No, and capitalism is as you can see with Venezuela right now, is intimately tied to imperialism. Whereas if you wanted to go into Gaza and you want China to do something about Gaza, that's irrelevant to the benefit of the people in China, which remains the focus of China, and they've done so effectively that now it's begun to spill out into the globally. Now you have people looking at it, especially through the BRICS, and they're going, well, there's this alternative that can internally improve the lives of the people we live with, and at this point, that doesn't include interfering in something like Gaza. Now, it's a shame because there should be some instrument in the world today to put the United States and Israel in its place permanently in its place. Yeah, so we never have to think about those noxious elements at all ever again. But there isn't. Like you say, it would be futile. It'd be like, actually, what you say.
So yeah, China can't do anything about this current genocide. They can't stop it and they want to, and they follow, they're outspoken. They give the rhetoric, but there's literally nothing they can do except they can work to change the material conditions to deteriorate, the power of the West to be able to do these things in the future with impunity. And that's the work that they're undergoing right now. That's the big the big work that they're doing is to manage the decline of Western imperialism with the least amount of death and destruction possible. You know, they don't want to, you know, end things with a nuclear holocaust, right? We want to manage the decline and progressively work towards better, different material conditions that provide more opportunities to the people. And one of those opportunities is that the West can no longer just engage in genocides with impunity like they historically have. But Greg, do you have any final thoughts? Ian needs to go, and I feel like I'm holding him here hostage and making him listen to my lecture. So
No,
Ian or
it's just
Greg,
my dog just losing his shit at my feet right now. That's why I'm muted. He's just barking at my feet right now. I apologize, but no, I have no thoughts.
I'm glad you were able to join us. We missed you last week. It was a 2-on-1, me and Leo against poor Carlo, and of course we won, and Carlo lost. But we appreciate you joining us, and again, I just feel bad that I probably talked over everybody most of the show. Greg, any final thoughts? You're our guest.
I don't think so.
Did you? I mean, was there? You put a lot of effort into the research, and did we do it justice? Did you get everything out that you were trying to share?
Well, we have it sounds like you and I have a slightly different focus right now with the materials. So, but yeah, I wanted to go through an outline of the back and forths.
And it's ongoing. We're not done. It's an ongoing discussion. But yeah, no, I think it's true that, yeah, we have a different approach, and I'm more interested in deconstructing, you know, common misconceptions and trying to proliferate my own understanding, which of course I think is superior to that of the understanding of liberals and anti-communists. So what are we going to see in the next week that we're going to be talking about next week? Like what are the big events that are going to, anybody have any prognostication? Are we going to see a war with Iran? What huge thing are we going to be talking about on Tuesday or Friday of next week?
Venezuela.
I can't imagine anything's going to happen in Venezuela. I think that's posturing.
I don't think anything's going to happen. I don't think there's really going to be any new developments on Tuesday.
You don't think an atomic submarine can track down drug dealers? You know.
No, I guess it's possible that they launch missiles at a drug, you know, a drug manufacturing military base. I guess that's possible, but I don't know what purpose that would serve.
I mean, all this is BS. Is there drugs in Venezuela? Is there drug?
That?
Is there drug trafficking? This is all made up. Yeah,
there isn't.
That's why I use scare quotes. Drug manufacturing.
Yeah. Certainly in
Ian,
Colombia,
no peace process, no big peace deal. We're not going to be talking about peace in Ukraine next week.
No.
Okay.
Oh no. Greg and I.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, we're locked in for years, right, Carlo?
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
I'm on record. By the end of September, things will be to such a state of the military that there's going to have to be some kind of an agreement. But what that looks like, I'm not sure we know. But and I could be wrong. But we will reconvene on Tuesday, we hope, whether or not there is any news at all. But we hope to see you again. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
We'll see you.
Bye.